Welcome to another episode of the Colm Flynn podcast, brought to you by thelastlines.net. In this episode, I'll be chatting with Stephen Allbright from Baltimore. Stephen is today the executive chef of a multi-million-dollar kitchen with a staff of about 50. That's impressive enough, but even more so when you learn about his background and where he came from. Growing up in the projects in New Jersey, Stephen's dad worked for the Mafia.
I knew early on because as a child, my mom told me that when she was holding me one day, some man was looking in the window when Dad came over and grabbed the guy and punched him. It was an FBI agent.
And when Stephen grew up, he copied many of his dad's habits when it came to alcohol, drugs, and women.
When I got married, I was cheating a week after I was married. You know, it was like, because I felt that's what you do.
Struggling with addiction, Stephen did manage to hold down a good job working as private security for some of Hollywood's biggest names. He was married, had a child, a nice house and car, but when he took his first shot of cocaine, little did he know how it was going to change his life forever.
For me, it was the cocaine. Once I started the cocaine, goodness gracious, I didn't know how to stop. Little did I know that it would take me on, like this long, run, ultimately all the way to prison.
And in this very personal interview, Stephen opens up about his relationship with his Mafia father, the violent assault he committed that sent him to prison, and how he was able to beat the addiction and ultimately turn his life around.
I mean, I really believe that God came to me and said, this is what I want you to do.
This is the Colm Flynn podcast, and my guest today is Stephen Allbright.
Okay, so it's Stephen Wayne Allbright, and I'm from, originally, a place called West New York, New Jersey.
West New York, New Jersey.
And it's actually 5 minutes outside of New York City.
And it's
on
actually,
the Jersey thing.
I've never heard of it, and it's called West New York.
Yeah, because it was named because it's west of New York City.
Wow. And when did you make the move then to big bad Baltimore?
So actually, I went to Baltimore via jail. So I was living on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. When I got arrested, that's when they first brought me to Baltimore in 2007.
So you,
yes.
I skipped way ahead in the story there. So that's how you ended up in Baltimore. You weren't living there before you got arrested or anything. You ended up in jail there. Wow.
I ended up at the prison in Baltimore, and then they moved me around afterwards. When you first get arrested, they send you to a indoctrination facility, a processing facility, which is in downtown Baltimore. I drive past it every day.
And what's that like? Were they just like getting you ready and saying breakfast is from this time to this time? If you want to use the swimming pool, these are the opening hours of the pool in jail.
It's funny because every other day you're locked in 18 hours. So you're out for 6, you're locked in for 18. And then the following day you're out for 18, locked in for 6. So it's pretty wild. Yeah. It's intense. You don't know anybody. I mean, unless of course you're locked up with someone you know.
Yeah.
But it's pretty crazy.
So before we get into that and how you ended up in prison and what you're doing now, the incredible life that you lead and the awards that you've been given and the accolades and the proper recognition for the great work that you do. When you were growing up, we all have an idea in our mind that the people who end up in prison are from a certain type of family in a certain type of neighborhood in a certain part of town. Did you fit into that category?
So I think the only way I think we fit into it is that we grew up in the projects in a place in West New York. So there, it wasn't as bad then because I grew up in the 60s. It was mostly that everyone was, I guess we considered middle class, but we were really, there were a bunch of working families and it just wasn't all black. I mean, it was Hispanic. It was, the Lamakis are from Czechoslovakia. The Sanzaris are Italian. The Laytons are Irish. And everyone had big families. So I'm talking about minimum of 6 to 10 kids.
Wow.
You always had someone to play with.
And what was it like, Stephen? Was it rough and tumble? Was it out adventurous every day? What was it like growing up in the projects?
Yeah. So it wasn't rough and tumble. We used to, back then, I mean, you're talking about the 60s, early 70s. So, you saw movies like West Side Story and you wanted to form a gang, and we actually had our little gang. And then a block away from us was another town. So West New York is on 50th Street where I grew up. 49th Street became Union City. That was predominantly Hispanic. So as a kid, believe it or not, we had like the Jets and the Sharks,
Little rival gangs.
Little rival gangs that, the way we fought then was we played wiffle ball. And whoever was would win the wiffle ball game was the gang, was the gang leader.
That was their turf then.
That was their turf. It was very, very few fights.
Was it a happy childhood?
So I would say my childhood was relatively happy. I'm one of 9 kids. I'm the middle child of. Everything was kind of normal as I remember up until I was about 12 when my father and my mom split up. They never divorced, but they lived apart. My dad had a 3rd grade education. Could barely spell his name, but he owned a car wash and he also owned a bar. So, slinging, it doesn't take much, but my dad believe it or not, was a bookie,
Okay.
was a little yeah. So he was I want to say a criminal element, but he was a bookie.
But when you say bookie in Ireland, we would say you go to the bookies if you want to bet on the horses. Is that the same?
Exactly.
Okay.
It is the same, except it's illegal in New Jersey and illegal then,
All right.
It wasn't it was, so everything was like part of organized crime. The mob ran it and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your dad was part of the mob?
Yes, I would say, yeah, it was interesting. So where I grew up was very interesting dynamic. When I grew up, it was predominantly Italian. And then there was the influx of Cubans from Cuba. So the Cuban Mafia took over from where the Italians left. And it was really amazing stories. I could tell you the chief of police from my hometown, he's passed now, was part of the organized crime and he got indicted, went to prison for it. He ran all the gambling, all the prostitution. These guys were real mobsters.
Wow.
And my father was part of that. Yeah.
When did you realize, we all know from watching The Sopranos, when the children of Tony Soprano start to get an inkling that their father is involved in organized crime and they have to confront him about it. Are you involved in the mob? And he says, no, who told you that? But when did you get an idea that maybe Dad's doing more than the car wash?
It was interesting. So at the car wash, my dad said to me, he gave me, I never forget this. He said, okay, look, Manny, who owned a bar a couple of blocks away from the car wash, my dad handed me a bag and he said, here, I want you to take this bag, don't open it, run it down to Manny. And Manny, so I took the bag, I ran it down the street. Manny set me up on a bar stool. I had a ginger ale. And then he gave me something to run back to my father, And I was basically running the numbers down the street to my dad. But I knew early on because as a child, my mom told me that when she was holding me one day, some man was looking in the window because our apartment where we lived was around the corner from my dad's business. And she called him and said, hey, there's some man looking in the window. And my dad came over and grabbed the guy and punched him. It was an FBI agent. The guy was doing surveillance, and underneath my dad's car wash in the basement was a legitimate mobster by the name of Bayonne Joe. And this guy was, he was like, so Sopranos, as me growing up, that's what I lived.
Wow.
It was part of my childhood.
And when you said you were running the numbers up and down from the bar to the car wash, does that mean bags of cash, bags of money?
You know what? I never looked inside the bag. I never knew what was in there. So I suspect it was numbers and money in there. Because, he'd say, take this and run it down the street. And then, it's funny because years later, I never asked him, but I would always think, God, what was I running down the block? The cops weren't going to grab me because they seen this kid running down the street, And
when you say numbers, you mean numbers for the bookies, for the horses?
Number slips. Yes, number slips.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And when you started to realize it, what was your view of it? Did you look at it and think, this is exciting, this is glamorous, this is something that I want to get into as well, this is cool?
Exactly. You wanted to be that, kingpin that I thought of that I would be, like, wow, look at my dad, he's well respected, people don't mess with him. He was a big man, but, people didn't mess with him. People always came to see him. They loved him. His name was Jim, hey, Jimmy, and he was stern with us. He was very, very, he was really stern with us, like if I wanted something, I needed to earn it. Like, I wanted money. He says, okay, well, you got to come to the car wash and wipe water off the car and, like dry the cars. And he would pay me $2 a day. And I said, gee, how come I get $2 a day? They said, because you don't do as much, you want more? My dad was, he was like, I remember they told me when he was like 13, when he came, my dad was from Savannah, Georgia. So, when he got to New Jersey with his aunt, he had to hustle, he had to work, he had to earn money. So
yeah, what do you think when you think of the lifestyle he chose and the profession, quote unquote? Do you think, Dad, why did you get into that life of crime? Or do you think, well, I know he's your father, so maybe you look at it more sympathetically, but you were doing what you had to do? Or what do you think?
Yeah. I think that what happened with my dad was he took care of his family. Like, I never had to worry about the lights being on. I never had to worry about the rent being paid. I never had to worry about food on the table. And like Easter was a big time for clothes. You get Easter clothes and stuff like that. He always provided for us. And I got to tell you, out of all the kids, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us went to college and have degrees.
Wow.
And are like, law-abiding citizens. Except me, I'm the one that went to jail. But no, there wasn't much like violence and a lot of yelling with my mother, my dad, because my dad, obviously with all of his lifestyle comes women, younger women, and my mom didn't appreciate. She wasn't having it.
Yeah. I wonder why.
She wasn't dealing with that. And
so this is just again true to the TV show that he'd be off kind of philandering and
it's true. It really is. It's funny, like when I looked at my life growing up, you live what you learn, and I did that for so many years. I was the same guy, not on the same level, but with the women was. For me, it was like when I got married, I was cheating a week after I was married. It's like, because I felt that's what you do. You provide for your family and you can do whatever you want.
Okay. And it's, you can still be a good husband and then have your kind of bit of fun on the side.
Exactly.
And so when you came of age, I presume you finished high school, and did you have you joined the Navy?
Yes. Right out of high school.
Why the Navy?
Well, you know what? I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to play football, and I wasn't a big person, So I met a recruiter, and I was really interested in the Navy. My brother, David, was a Marine. My dad was in the Army. I had a cousin that was in the Air Force. So I said, well, why not join the Navy? And I liked the idea of, a sailor in it, a girl in every port, doing all that, traveling the world. And it just excited me. I even said it when my dad passed away. Not that he left us, when your father passes away, okay, I'm going to leave my children this. He left us in a state, but it was dead.
Oh, so really? So when he passed away, there was a mess left behind for you to clean up and deal with.
Well, it wasn't so bad, but it wasn't nothing that, okay, we can live on or build on, it wasn't like the Vanderbilts, we got a great reputation from where I came from, but that's about it. Our name, the last name, Allbright,
And was that because the business was illegal and it was mob business, so it was difficult to leave a legacy behind for you guys?
I think so. Yeah. And I think because he gambled a lot too. My dad used to love to gamble, So
he loved the women. He loved the gambling. Did he have any flaws?
Loved drinking. Loved drinking. Loved drinking. I mean, I think as far as as a father, you know, so this is an interesting question because I have struggles with my mother and my dad, but I think the issues with my mom, and it's something that Father Leo said the other day. I was watching about love. I never felt love really from my mom. I seen her give it to my sisters more than I thought I got. But my dad, you want to immortalize this crazy character in your life. And it's like this guy's chaotic and so forth. I think he did the best he can with the tools he had.
Mm.
So third grade education. What do you know?
He didn't know any. Yeah, he didn't know any better.
I mean, I remember spelling vegetable. Like things that stand out. Vegetable, right? Spelling vegetable. He would say to me, "Go give me some vegetable soup," and I said, "Write it down." And he didn't know how to spell vegetable. But if you asked the man, like, how much does this number combination pay? Blah blah blah. I mean, he was amazing with money and numbers. And you always, again, I can never say that we never had food, clothes or lights, or, I mean, some people struggle like, oh, the lights were off and, your mom's got, my mom never worked. My mother never worked.
And then what did you do, Stephen, after you were in the Navy then? Because did that do you good? You know how they say, give us a boy, we'll give you a man. I mean, did it straighten you out a bit?
Yeah, it did. So, I mean, I joined at 17. At 19, I was married with having a baby. I learned a great career. And I was in for about 5 years when my brother David died, tragically. He had a cerebral hemorrhage. And that was my best friend. And that's the first time I ever tried drugs, believe it or not. I was like 23 years old. And cocaine took me out of, I didn't feel anything. And that's what I didn't want to feel.
This was after your brother passed away. You tried it for the first time.
Yeah.
What was it like? I've never touched cocaine. I don't know what it's like. I've talked to people who have tried it. And what was it like when you first took it?
It made me forget about everything. My worries, my woes. It got me to a euphoria where I didn't care about anything else. Little did I know that it would take me on, like this long, run of, ultimately all the way to prison, but and it kind of ruined my naval career because I had to get out of the Navy after 8 years because of my substance abuse. But
did it start quickly? I mean, did you just start taking straight away?
Yeah, once I did the first half a gram I did, I was off to the races.
Really?
I could not. Yeah. I mean, we always drank. So we drank beer and we drank alcohol, but that was never, for me, it was the cocaine. Once I started the cocaine, goodness gracious, I didn't know how to stop. I mean, I got out of the military in 1987 and 5 days later I was in rehab.
Wow. And how did you fund it? Because it's an expensive addiction to have. I suppose an addict finds the money.
So it was, I mean, really, I was in the military at the time. So my military check, I worked part-time. So I was I finally, after being afloat around the world, I was home on recruiting duty. So I was home in New Jersey and I took a part-time job at a bar as a bouncer, believe it or not. And I funded it that way. My wife ultimately left me. I lost the car. We sold the house, we separated. She moved on. I moved on.
Do you put all of that down to the cocaine?
Absolutely. The drugs was, the drugs and the alcohol at the time. I mean, it was, I can't attribute to losing anything else. I mean, I had a loving wife and I had an amazing kid, so, and I had a family that was, against it, trying to, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah. Were other people in your family involved in drugs, or was it just you turned out this way?
It's just, me. Other people have smoked, marijuana and stuff like that, but nothing to the point of my, except my brother David, the one that passed away.
Yeah,
he used to do drugs, and he drank excessively. So alcoholism runs in my family. I believe both my parents were alcoholics. At least I know my dad and my mom both were. I suffered from it. My brother David.
And then, just to look at your timeline, then after that, is that when you went to Maryland, or when did you get to?
No. So it's interesting. So I after the military, I got sober for a little bit. Tried to restart my marriage. That didn't work. So I kept relapsing, and I finally, in 19, I can tell you the year. It's like 1992. I got sober. I was in a place in Florida, in Boca Raton, called the Renaissance Institute. It was crazy. I had a cousin that was a drug counselor up in New York State, and he tried to get me sober. And I mean, I remember running down the hill from but I got sober in Boca, and I came back to New Jersey, and I went to work with my nephew in the security company that we did a lot of celebrities. We protected a lot of celebrities. So from 1992 to 1997, I stayed sober. No drinking, no drugs. I worked with, that time I worked with every crazy, if you name a celebrity, I worked with them.
Who are you working with?
Like Madonna to JFK Jr.
Wow.
I could send you some photos of me and JFK Jr.
That's wild now, and we see him so much in the news now, of course, at the moment. And
you name it. I was at Trump's second wedding, believe it or not.
No way.
Marla Maples, yeah. I was part of a security detail there.
So would you have much interaction with the celebrities when you were, I suppose, different from one to one?
Yeah, so I did. I was actually, I grew in this company, so I became the director of operations there. So I had direct contact all the time with either their point of contact or meeting them. I was on a first name basis with several people.
So what happened? What went wrong? Because this sounds like things were going great. You were sober. I presume you were happy. You were making money.
I relapsed.
You relapsed.
I relapsed. I was dating a songwriter. I'll never forget her name. She was English. Her name was Tina Harris. She was pretty famous in her own right. And she decided to move from LA because I lived in New York. I lived in New York City, traveled to LA and Miami. It was like my Bermuda Triangle. And do you remember the Studio 54 days? Ian Schrager and Steve
I've seen documentaries about the Studio 54 days. And
so I worked for them. I worked for Ian. I worked for a company that we did the security for all of Ian's hotels, the Paramount, the Royalton, the Delano in South Beach, the Mondrian in LA.
Wow.
So I dated this songwriter. She's a lyricist from England. And anyway, we were moving in together, and I panicked. So I relapsed.
And you panicked because you thought it was going too fast, or this was becoming very final?
We had been together. Yeah, this was the end for me. I was never going to be able to
live your single life again.
Exactly. So I panicked. We relapsed. We lived together shortly, and then she moved out, moved on. I think she lives in Paris now.
Wow. Actually. So the drugs got a grip of you again, even though you were sober from 92 to 97. And was it back with a vengeance?
It was. It was worse. It took me out. Listen, literally. So in 97, I was 35 years old. It was bad. It was bad. I ended up moving out west to New Mexico, to Santa Fe, trying to find peace, but I just found more drugs out there.
How were you feeling, Stephen? Because, I remember when we met at the restaurant you work in now in Washington, D.C., there a few months ago. The first thing that hits you when you meet you is that you're such a happy-go-lucky guy. You've got a great positive attitude, a very sunny disposition, just like you have now. But what was your mental state like and your personality then?
Very dark. Suicidal. I was on the grips. At the end of it, I wanted nothing to do with my life anymore. I actually, I believe it or not, I cursed God. I said, this is what you want me to be, a drug addict. This is what I'm supposed to be. So I'm going to be the very best drug addict I could be. That was that was the craziness, and you look at it and I said to myself, like, why me? Why not? I wasn't robbing money from people. I was, I mean, when in the end, you start looking at it, I stole time from my daughter. I stole time from, I cheated them on all this, but I wasn't the guy you saw on the street. I mean, I made a lot of money, so I was buying good drugs and, you know, had drugs delivered to my house and whatever the case may be.
Were you a functioning addict then? You were able to still function even with your addiction? Yeah.
I was. We were doing a detail. I remember a security detail with Princess Di. Okay. My mother watched it on television and she said to me, what do you think that woman would say to you if she knew what you do? And it kind of shook me up. Like you're going to call Princess Di and tell her I'm a drug addict?
Yeah.
But she was really serious about it. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, around all these people and not that I was high at work, but I knew I was going to get high after work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Get high before I came to work, whatever the case may be.
And I'm sure there were cases where you would get high before going to do
Oh, absolutely.
A gig.
Sleeping in my office if I had to, you know what I'm saying? It was a mess.
Yeah, what do you do when people are trying to get you into rehab and to get you sober and clean, and when you just don't want it, when you want to keep drinking, you want to keep taking drugs?
Yeah. You curse them and you tell them to stay away from you. I mean, at least that's what I did. And I isolated, I hid from them. I wanted nothing to do with anybody that tried to get me, to try to talk some sense into me about getting sober. I mean, I knew how to get sober. All I needed to do was go to a meeting, and I mean, no one wants the fact of surrendering, something they talk about in the NA rooms and AA rooms, like the three things is jails, institutions, and death. I already knew I'd been institutionalized, several times. In 2007, when I got arrested, well, here I am sitting in a jail cell thinking about the next 64 years, because that's what I was facing, 64 years, and taking a plea agreement to get sentenced to 20 years. So, I'm looking at, at 45 years old going to prison. So in 2007, on May 29th, when I had my assault and I got arrested and I ended up in a psych hospital, at first, wanting to hurt myself, but then, I realized I needed to stay sober to try to beat this charge. So May 29th, 2007 is my sobriety date. I haven't had a drink or a drug since then.
Wow. That is incredible. Yeah. And this is your longest period clean?
Over 17 years.
Wow,
yeah.
That is incredible. And what happened in 2007, if you don't mind me asking? What was, so it must have been a pretty bad assault if that was the charge that you were getting.
I assaulted my girlfriend because she was cheating and so forth. I felt betrayed. So I took it out on her, we're involved in some craziness with drugs and alcohol, and I assaulted her. I beat her with a pistol, and I wanted them to kill me, obviously, but that didn't happen. So
when you say them, the police who responded?
Yeah, I was kind of like on a suicide by cop kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
and was she hurt very badly? Was she?
No, not severely. I mean, up to the point where she had 13 stitches. I mean, I shouldn't say she wasn't hurt badly. I'm sure she was traumatized by me zapping out,
Yeah.
As anyone would be. I don't want to minimize it and say what I did was, I no way I want to minimize it. It was crazy behavior. I was under the influence, but, I was angry. I mean, it was more about the feelings of being betrayed and being not loved and not, because I love this woman, I did everything for her to help her.
And were you still playing the field at that stage, or were you committed to her?
So we were kind of committed, but we were playing the field. You know what I mean? It was crazy. It's crazy.
With the drugs mixed in, everything just gets is crazy.
Sure. Everything gets clouded, So, it's someone I deeply cared about, So, anyway, the interesting thing. So I just kind of had an epiphany. All these things with my life, right? Growing up from a childhood to the military to security, It's interesting because I can put it in perspective now, how God has carried me. Even to this point, when you start looking at my career now, coming out of prison, working my way up the chains and, to become the chef that I am, right? And I'm not a great chef. I just happen to be, I'm able to do a great job, There's always been one thing that's been present. I mean, there's no other reason why.
So you mean it's like God's hand in your life helping each time you fell down and relapsed, you're given a new chance?
A new chance. And then finally, when I do the assault, he sits me down to the point where, okay, you're going to go to prison. Now I have you as a cap. Now you're going to listen to me, because now you have to listen to me, because there's no out. There's these big wire fences. You're in this little cell. Where are you going?
And that was in Baltimore.
That started in Baltimore, but it ended up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Okay.
And then I ended up back in Baltimore. That's how I'm still here now. At the end, they brought me back to Baltimore to be released.
Wow. How many years were you in prison in total?
So it was just about 6 in total.
6 years, but the original sentence was
20 years, all suspended with 10. So I got 20 years. They suspended 10 years. So I had to do 10 years first, and then 5 years probation.
And what was it like in prison? Was that a tough adjustment?
Oh my God. 45 years old, going to a place that, I've actually believed they were going to kill me. That's my first day there. I said, I'm going to die here or end up killing somebody here and being here for the rest of my life. Because, it's about self-preservation. And there were gangs. It was tough. It was very difficult. I met people that were more like-minded like me. So I'm in prison and I'm practicing Buddhism. I'm going to church, staying away from out of trouble.
Could you go to church in prison? There was every Sunday they would have a church service with a church inside the prison itself.
Absolutely. And it wasn't until I was getting close to getting released when I came back to Baltimore. 2000. So I was all over. They send you to different prisons throughout the state of Maryland.
Why do they move you around from prison to prison? Is it just with capacity and with numbers?
Capacity, numbers, but also security level.
Okay.
So as you're doing good, your level comes down. And as your time finishes, your level comes down. So I ended up back in Baltimore at the Metropolitan Transition Center, and I was the only Buddhist there. And Monday nights was Buddhist services, and Monday nights was Catholic services. Side by side. I'd sit in a room by myself, or I could look at this room with 10 guys in it, a priest and a deacon. And one of the gentlemen I used to walk the yard with, Bill Gertner, he's actually still my good friend, and I sit on a board with him. He invited me to go to the Catholic services one night. So I did. I walked in there and I was blown away. I met this priest named Father Chuck, who Father Leo's good friends with. And I also met Deacon Marty Wolf. And they treated me like, I wasn't even Catholic. Reverend Deacon gave me a book, 7-Story Mountain, Thomas Merton. I read that book and I never left that service.
Wow.
I was convinced.
You were convinced.
That's it.
What was it that convinced you?
It was just the way Merton's views, Thomas Merton, obviously, I enjoyed listening to his life as he was in New York early on, and then becoming a monk. I was like, oh my God, could this be me? I don't know. It was just something that grabbed me, and I decided I could continue to go. And then, I had to have a plan when I was getting released.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to go to culinary school. So I had hoped to have gone to CIA up New York. But when I got released from prison, the state of Maryland said, you're not leaving the state. You have to stay here.
Oh, really? That was one of the conditions on your early release. You had to stay there. Okay.
Yeah. So I had no place to go. So I went, so, when you become willing to do anything, you do anything. So right. I went to a halfway house in Baltimore. And I lived at a halfway house for 45 days before I had enough money saved to rent an apartment.
That's incredible. And when you were in prison, what's the most difficult thing about being in prison?
I think the most difficult thing for me was not having access to my family. Now, you can get visits, you can get letters and mails, but for me was when I witnessed my mother the first time she came to visit me in prison, how they searched her and how they here's an 80-year-old woman and they took away her bra because it had wired. I said, that's it. I took everyone off my visitors list. And I realized someone told me, when you're doing time in prison, your family's doing time with you too. Not in prison, but they're doing time with you. So I didn't want I took everyone off my visitors list. I wouldn't let anybody come to visit me, no matter where I was. So even if you came there, you couldn't get in because you weren't on the visitors list because I didn't have one.
Was your dad still alive? Your dad, Jim, was he still with you?
My dad was still alive. I didn't speak to him often. My mother died about 4 months before I got released.
Oh, okay.
She died she had a heart, but my dad was still alive afterwards.
Were you able to go out for your mother's funeral?
I wasn't. I was out on work release at the time. So I would go out every day to work, and I was gone for 12 hours a day at work. I was working believe it or not, at a restaurant called P.F. Chang's.
Okay.
And I said to myself, well, I should just take off and go to New Jersey because they'll never know.
Yeah.
I could be in New Jersey in 2.5 hours at my mom's funeral and back to work before they even knew. But if you did that, you got caught, they violate you. All that good time that you worked for, you lose it. And then I'd have to spend more time in prison.
It's not worth the risk.
It wasn't worth the risk. It wasn't.
And your dad, he passed away soon after you come out of prison, or when did he pass?
No, about my dad. So it's 2024. I think my dad passed away about 5 years ago.
Okay.
5 years ago.
Yeah, but
my dad was 95 when he passed away.
Oh wow! So he lived.
He lived forever.
All that good living, it didn't.
Exactly. That's what I say.
But your poor mother. It must be so difficult for a mother to see her son, who, even though you didn't maybe feel the love from her, you have that maternal, bond that is there, and then seeing her son in prison, and she doesn't get to see the day you're released.
Yeah, but it was one thing I think she realized though because we started talking more, we wrote each other. I think she realized that even though it was there, I was safe. I was in a better place. I was sober, which was really important to her. And then I had a lot of clarity about what I wanted to do with myself. I knew I could never work in security again. And it's not just the cooking part of it. I think it was more so that I had peace with me. And, I think that peace came through, from the Buddhism, learning to meditate, learning to be still and be quiet. And then, going over to the Catholic services, learning that there was love. I mean, that's really where I first started seeing the love,
Despite what you had done, and despite the life you'd had.
Exactly. Yeah. And and it was just, people I stayed with had a plan. And some of them, like I said, I'm still in touch with a few of them that are very important in my life still, and that's how I ended up being, like Bill Gertner, my friend, that's how I ended up being Father Leo.
And when you left, when you got out in, what was it, 2014,
yes.
What were you thinking then? I mean, when you see as well in America, when you're in a job interview, one of the questions is, have you ever been incarcerated? I mean, if you give an honest answer and say yes, there's fat chance you're probably going to get that job. So what were your prospects when you came out?
So the prospects aren't that great. I mean, yes, you have to be honest, because when you're looking at your resume, you're asking about that. But the job I chose in cooking, I knew that there was, I can tell you, I bet you it's the same case in the world, all over the world. Any kitchen you walk in, you're going to find at least one or two ex-cons.
Really?
Yeah, because cooking is one of the most forgiving industries. Nobody wants to be in a 120-degree kitchen in the middle of the summertime over a hot grill cooking a steak for somebody that's going to pay $100 for a steak. And you're doing it for close to minimum wage. Right? So when you think about that,
Yeah,
you
that's a
say,
good way of putting it.
yeah, who's going to serve you? The less, I mean, we look at kitchens in America today. A lot of immigrants in kitchens, a lot of returning citizens in kitchens, people that have, substance abuse issues are in kitchens. I mean, you find the least of these. It's like, what is it, Saint Teresa of Avila said, you look for Jesus, they'll go on the pots and pans.
Yeah.
I mean, all these things. It's the truth. I mean, trust me. In my kitchen, I'm the biggest ex-con in the kitchen, of course. But I might have 3 or 4 people that have been to jail, that work for me.
It's amazing. When we met, there was a beautiful line that you said to us on camera when we were interviewing you for EWTN. You said when you left, you would have just willingly cleaned the pots and the pans in the kitchen. You never in your wildest dreams would have imagined that you would have become the executive chef, the top chef in a big restaurant in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. It's the truth. I mean, there's 2 things. One, they took a chance on me, Cuba Libre. But, it's God putting me in that path. I mean, all the work I've done. I mean, so, on work release, working at P.F. Chang's, if it wasn't for Kevin Fleming, the first chef I had, saying to me, all right, I'm going to teach you how to cook. And I'm like, I'm not sure about this, I'm 52 years old. I never cooked for anybody but myself and my daughter, and he said, just relax. I'm going to teach you, him taking an interest in me. And then, when I got to Capitol Grill and Matt Jaffe, I remember every chef I've worked with, what I'm saying, that has given me an opportunity to train me. And, again, I'm a little bit older than the younger kids, so I have a past. But when you move your way through and trying to navigate, and you get to people like Father Leo, it's like, okay. I mean, I never forget getting the call from Bill Gertner, who said, Father, this cooking priest, he needs an assistant. And I'll tell you how God works, right? So here it is. So I'm at my apartment. He calls me and says, this priest needs an assistant. He's a cooking guy. And I said, all right, never heard of him. Where does he live? He gives me his address. I call him up. He says, okay, can you come for an appointment? Literally, like I'm thinking, okay, where's this priest? Father Leo literally lived 4 blocks away from where my apartment was, which was around the corner from my culinary school.
Isn't that incredible? So you could just walk around.
Which was 3 blocks from where I worked at Capitol Grill. Everything was in my neighborhood. And I said, oh, this is pretty amazing, So, like when I'm doing all this, right, I'm saying, okay. And this guy, I meet him and I talk with him and he's like, okay, I'm going to hire you right away. And it's like, okay, what do I do? I have no idea what I do, and I just learned working with him, showed me a lot of compassion, showed me a lot of love, introduced me to a few other, Father Colm, who's my spiritual advisor, who,
he's a great guy as well. I've met him.
Oh, you met Colm?
Yes. Yes. Great guy.
That's my guy. So, but yeah, so just this thing. And then, Leo telling me, look, I don't want you to become Catholic because I'm a Catholic priest. Don't do it because you work for me. I'm not asking you to do that. What changed me and why I became Catholic was when I would go to places like Indiana with Father Leo or New Orleans, and I go into these people's houses, people I have no idea who, and some famous and some not so famous. And I tell my story. Not one person came up to me and said, you don't belong here. It was just the outreach of love that I received from everyone that was Catholic. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, this is something, like, what do you want from me? Nothing. They didn't ask for anything. It was just like, oh, it's so great you're here. But, I was like blown away.
Wow. Blown
away. And when I told Leo, I said, I'm going to start doing RCIA. He said, okay, you sure you want to do this? I said, of course, and I was going to choose the church in Little Italy. And he said, don't go there because I want you to look around and find it. So again, here's God again. So I'm going to segues it. So here, God, I go to this church, and it's never open. I said, what's going on with this church? It's never open. And every time I go there, there's like I went in one day for mass and they didn't do mass. The priest was setting up for a funeral. And it's called St. Francis Xavier, right? So I go there and I go out to the car and I start reading up about this church. And I said, oh my goodness, the cornerstone was laid on February 21st, 1864. And I looked up in my car and I looked up at the sky. I said, God, you're playing a joke on me. Well, February 21st is the day I got out of prison.
Okay, wow.
So I knew that's where I had to go for RCIA.
That's amazing.
And it's one of the most historic Black Catholic churches in the country. So it's right here in the East Baltimore. And I went there for RCRA. And I stayed there for about a year, till I got my communion and so forth, So when I decided, I went to work for Leo. And then after that, I left to go to the Lighthouse because I said, Father, I needed to give something back. I needed to do something, I need to help the less fortunate. I spent a short time in Annapolis, but then when I got to the Franciscan Center, that changed everything.
Tell me about the work you do at the Franciscans Center. This is feeding the homeless, feeding those, not just the homeless, but anyone who needs a helping hand.
Anybody. Yeah. So it was a place that I got to where I said to myself, there are people that are more broken than me. And I'm broken, but I knew that I had to do something different. I remember the very first day I cut this. They had like this fountain machine that would pump out this yellow stuff. And it was all sugar. And the first day I got clippers and I cut the wires. I said, we're only serving water from this day forward. And I realized, so it's interesting, the shrine at St. Anthony had a farm. So I guess Pope Francis challenged the Franciscans when he first became Pope. You need to do something for the homeless. At least this is the story that I was told. That shrine decided to build a farm, little portion farm. All the produce from that farm was sent to the Franciscan Center.
So you had the fresh produce to use, the freshest things.
Everything. Exactly. The freshest. So I was feeding everyone fresh produce, fresh. And then I started finding more farms and I started, so we were serving the best possible food and doing things because they never had a chef before. So, when Jeff, the executive director that hired me, they never had a chef. They had cooks. I was teaching, we got rid of all the canned stuff. I said, we're not using cans anymore, I mean, we're using real food, we started changing the way we fed the homeless. I believe that, like I told Jeff, everyone in prison, you have to get a hot meal every 3 days.
Yeah.
No matter what. We got to start feeding people. And of course, then the pandemic hit. So, you got this crazy pandemic. And I was like, no, we're going to stay open. We got to feed people. And the first year, I think we fed 350,000 meals.
Wow, that's incredible. And these are people you can relate to, not that you were homeless, but people suffering with addiction issues, mental health issues.
All of it.
And just feeling like they're worthless and that they've...
Exactly. And me and then, the interesting thing, so we started doing that. And then we started teaching people like at the Franciscan Center how to plate. So we developed, dignity plates. So the Franciscan Center's motto is run by the Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi. They, these nuns, they had a thing, dignity, something with dignity is our, and I said, dignity to me is a person. So your name is Dignity, and now you're going to plate this food for someone. And I taught all the volunteers, look, you're not going to eat this if someone throws it on a plate, would you? Would you want to get served this? You have to show dignity to these people and show them that, your protein goes here, your starch goes here, your vegetable goes here. So we started plating every day and it became and we developed a website called Dignity Plates.
Wow. That's a great idea because it changes everything when you see, when someone, you instill that dignity in them or make them feel like they have dignity again. Exactly.
And we developed that and we developed a culinary training program, Dignity Plates Training Academy. I had a lot of people around me in my life that did things to boost me up. And I really can't take any credit for it except the fact that I continue to show up. I believe what I was doing, I was giving back what God I mean, I really believe that God came to me and said, this is what I want you to do. I still believe that, and I'm still involved with different programs now, but, then I said I know this is what he wants. And for, almost 3 years, I fed the homeless throughout Baltimore and the county. And, again,
that is incredible.
Again, I say me, but it was the whole organization.
But still, a lot of people don't do it, and you didn't have to do it, but you did it. So that is an incredible thing, and why you were given that great award in Baltimore. And now I know you're still living in Baltimore, but you're working in Washington, D.C. at that Cuban restaurant. Correct. So now that you're the executive chef, your time is more limited because you're so busy there running. You have like 50 staff, is it?
Yeah. So with the restaurant total staff is I believe about 85. But yeah, in the kitchen, I have, my prep team, my line team, my dishwashers. So yeah, I have about.
Do you enjoy it? Do you like it?
I do. I love them. They're great people. Again, they elevate me and make me look good.
No,
everything.
We had a great dinner there one night. The crew and I and the producers came down from the studio. You come out of the kitchen. We looked like we were the kings. The kingpins, because the chef come over to our table and was slapping the backs and everything. Okay, can I get you something else? I'll send some stuff to the table. So we had a great time. And we'd filmed with you the day before or something like that. And just your positive attitude, and you were just so much fun to talk to. And then it's hard to believe that you've had the background you have had because of our stereotypes and our misconceptions and the way we think of people who've been incarcerated, or the proper way of referring to it now is returning citizens, is it?
Yeah, they're returning citizens. That's what they call us.
Returning citizens.
I like to call us the ex-cons.
Ex-cons, I know. I saw, how people getting very woke and not wanting to offend. Where were we driving through? Maybe it was Baltimore, and I saw a thing up in the thing. Have you had an interaction with the law? Come here to our center. It's like an interaction with the law. It's like, AKA, have you been locked up?
I'm telling you, probably about 80% of Baltimore's had an interaction with the law.
So what do you put it down to, your success? Not just your professional success, but I mean the fact that you were able to turn the odds around. The odds were not in your favor when you were heavy on the drugs and in the grips of addiction. What do you put it down to?
So, I mean, obviously the most obvious thing for me is God and coming back to the church, having a different, growing up, you learned about God being the punishing God, the Old Testament, and, not realizing that Jesus is, what would Jesus do? That's the question I sometimes ask myself. What would, and here I see this man that's, who's done nothing but show compassion and love. And, I mean, it's just amazing, that there are people like that. And, for me, I believe I was put on this earth to do that. Even at the restaurant, I say to myself, here I am doing this for profit, but I have externs that come to the restaurant that are trained there from DC Central Kitchen. I'm going to be going to a graduation in another place here. I still lend my time to all these different nonprofits that do culinary training programs, because I believe my thing, like Father Leo's, is food and faith. I mean, he has a little different, he, of course, does a little different than it. I mean, I don't know if he does it different than me. He employs people. I just, the opportunity that he gave me, the opportunity that I had, and just all the people that I surrounded myself. It's the reason I'm at this point right now. Meeting you, for instance. I mean, come on, listen, this is amazing that I'm sitting here talking to you, having this. I mean, it's humbling. When I really look at it, I mean, why should, you could speak to it.
I thought you were going to say that when you were talking to me, you felt like things were bad again in your life.
It's just, I mean, the opportunity to tell my story, and someone to be listening and interested, or it's like going to an AA meeting or an NA meeting. You get to tell your story,
And it's good taking something that was bad and negative and using it and saying, well, I can't change the past as much as I regret things and would love to change it.
Right.
I can't. No one can. But to use it then to try and turn it into something positive that can help others.
Right.
That's a great way.
And all glory goes to, the Almighty. I mean, I tell you, I wouldn't, one, I wouldn't be alive. I know that, because I didn't care about living. And to be able to do the things I do now, the transformation, I look at food as I transform a raw product into something that's cooked and delicious. And I look like that as my life, I mean, I was raw, I had a little taste of the church early on. I got away from it and I became raw. And then over the 6 years of transforming, and then even after that, I mean, not to have a drink in 17 years, that's not an easy thing. One day at a time.
Yeah. Are you still tempted today?
Something that's interesting? It says in our book, the AA book, that the obsession will be lifted from me. I believe that obsession is gone, The obsession to drink and drug is gone. And it's because, I don't need to do it. It's every day. I mean, people drink around me, people, people that smoke weed around me, all kinds. And it's not I know where it takes me.
Yeah.
And where to go. But there's not that burning urge like it was early on. Like, I need a drink. I'm not going to be able to survive without a drink. How am I going to be able to face the world without a drink? How can I talk to you without having a drink? I'm drinking coffee. I drink Red Bull's my addiction today.
Yeah, new addiction. But it's not your mojo anymore.
Right. Wow. Exactly. So I believe that obsession's been lifted from me. Thank God. But I'm grateful for, where I am. I mean, obviously, is everything perfect in my life? No, I still struggle with finances sometimes. Trying to get an understanding of, how to save money or when to spend money. And, I'm always spending money on food because I always want to eat,
yeah. And finally, your daughter who you mentioned, you have one daughter?
Just one, Christian. Her name is Christian.
What age is she now?
She's 22. She teaches high school in New Jersey. And I'll tell you how even a synchronicity is there. Her husband is Polish.
Uh-huh.
And Colby was Polish. They go to mass. My daughter is a devout Catholic. She has no children. Unfortunately, she couldn't have children, but she has a stepson and, she calls her son. And, they just got back from Poland, actually.
Oh, that's beautiful.
They did it. Poland, yeah. Marcin is her husband. They've been married now. I was a month early on the anniversary. She said, "You called me a month early." I said,
wow.
well, at least I'm early.
At least I'm early. And you, she is 41, so you're
42.
42. You look remarkably young. What age are you?
So I'm 62.
62.
Yes.
You don't look it for a second.
Well, I think it's all the alcohol the years before that preserved me, pickled me. So, but it's funny. I feel it some days. I feel my bones are getting a little old.
Not at all.
It's hard to keep up. Yeah.
It's vitamin L. That's the laughter and love.
Yes.
When you have a lot of it, you look younger, you feel younger, and you are younger.
Thank you.
Stephen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I know that you've got to run. You're going into work right now as we speak from Baltimore, heading down to Washington. Watch the speed limit. I don't want you ending up back in the slammer as a result of this interview. It's not worth it. And
right.
Listen, it was a pleasure meeting you in the kitchen a few months ago. And I would thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Let me know when you come back. Bring your fiance and come to eat. I'll be subplacing around.
Oh, yeah. That was a good rehearsal, Stephen. We'll record that now, okay?
Okay. Yes.